The Pacific Ocean, a vast battleground of power, dominance, and strategy. The United States Navy has ruled these waters for decades, with its aircraft carriers acting as floating fortresses of destruction. But now, China is making bold moves, sending its warships dangerously close to U.S. carrier strike groups. Stay with us as we break down why challenging U.S. aircraft carriers could be a disastrous miscalculation for China. Let's talk about what makes an aircraft carrier the most powerful weapon at sea. The U.S. operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, each capable of launching over 70 aircraft, including F-35s, F/A-18 Super Hornets, and electronic warfare jets. But it's not just the ships themselves. These carriers don't operate alone. They are the heart of a carrier strike group, CSG, surrounded by guided missile destroyers, cruisers, and submarines, each ready to defend and strike back at any threat. Recently, China has increased its naval presence in the South China Sea and beyond, conducting aggressive maneuvers near U.S. Navy fleets. With its Type 055 guided missile destroyers and aircraft carriers like the Liaoning and Fujian, China is attempting to project power in the region. Throughout history, China has traditionally been a land power, but as it takes on naval superpower status, it's modernizing and expanding sea and air forces to protect its maritime interests. That's why it commissioned its first carrier, Liaoning, in 2012. Originally an unfinished, rusting hull acquired from a Ukrainian shipyard in 1998, Liaoning was finally completed in a shipyard in Dalian, China. A second carrier, Shandong, was built as a copy of Liaoning and demonstrated China could build carriers on its own. The third, Fujian, was launched in 2022 and proved China could not only build, but design carriers of its own. As China's new aircraft carrier fleet continues to grow in anticipation of 2049, military leaders and defense analysts are closely watching. Could plan catch up in numbers, technology, or both? Nimitz versus Liaoning. Both Nimitz and Liaoning represent the bulk of carriers in their respective countries. The Nimitz-class ships constitute 10 of America's 11 carriers. China currently operates 2 carriers, Liaoning, launched in 2012, and Shandong, launched in 2019, that are roughly identical to one another in capabilities. One of the biggest differences between the carriers is in aircraft launch systems, says Matthew Funayole, a senior fellow in the China Power Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The Nimitz class uses a steam-powered catapult system, catabar, that allows aircraft to take off fully fueled and armed, maximizing their combat effectiveness. By contrast, Liaoning and Shandong rely on ski jump ramps, which restrict aircraft takeoff weight and drastically reduce their fuel and weapons load. This limits both the range and firepower of Chinese carrier-based aircraft. Another major difference between the two ships is propulsion. All of America's aircraft carriers are nuclear-powered. Nimitz carriers can operate for decades without refueling, Funayole says, while China's conventionally powered carriers need frequent refueling, limiting their range and endurance. While China's carriers will generally operate closer to the Chinese mainland than their globe-trotting American counterparts, if they want to venture farther abroad, nuclear power is the way to go. Ford versus Fujian. America's newest aircraft carrier is the USS Gerald R. Ford, the only non-Nimitz class ship in the fleet and the first of her class. Fujian is also the first of her class, a totally new Chinese design, and a marked departure from the first two carriers. The comparison between the Ford class and Fujian is a little more interesting, Funayole explains. But there remains a large gap in capabilities. Fujian is China's first attempt at a modern aircraft carrier, and it represents a significant leap forward for the plan. Like the Ford class, it uses a catabar system, meaning it uses catapults instead of ski jumps, allowing it to launch heavier aircraft with greater payloads. Ford versus Fujian, future air wing. The year 2045 will see both Ford and Fujian still in service, that is, if neither has been sunk in combat. While the ships will remain the same, there are already changes afoot that should see major changes to the aircraft both embark, making them more powerful than ever. In the 2030s, the U.S. Navy is set to put a new sixth-generation fighter, next-generation air dominance, into service. The Navy's NGAD, separate from the Air Force program of the same name, is the service's opportunity to right some design shortcomings in the F-35, namely a lack of range and a relatively small weapons payload. As a result, Navy NGAD will likely result in a relatively large fighter for a carrier flight deck, one that can give carriers a long-range punch, outranging Chinese anti-ship weapons. NGAD will replace the last of the Super Hornets, making for a flight deck that's a mix of F-35C and NGAD fighters. But let's be clear. Any conflict between these two superpowers would have devastating consequences for the world. The Pacific is a critical trade route, and military tensions could disrupt global supply chains, cause economic collapses, and lead to a dangerous escalation into full-scale war. For now, the United States and China continue their dangerous game of brinkmanship. But if Chinese warships push too far, it could lead to a military confrontation with consequences beyond imagination. The U.S. Navy remains the most powerful maritime force in the world, and any challenge to its dominance is a serious risk. Will China back down? Or will tensions continue to rise? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more military insights.